Welcome to Broadway Drumming 101. Today, my guests are a bunch of people. This is the first time I've ever done a group podcast, and it's featuring Andrés Forero and several other prominent musicians in New York City: Alex Giosa, Ryan McCausland, Dena Tauriello, and Juan Felipe Mayorga. Welcome, everybody.
Hi, thank you.
Hey,
I have a question for you, for all of you. When I saw Andres play Hamilton a couple months ago, and I've heard about it, I didn't actually, I've heard about it, but I didn't see it. I didn't really realize it was real until I saw it. But there are 5 snare drums on the left hand side. Which one is your favorite?
I'll chime in on that. I really love playing the piccolo. Of course, I'm being facetious now because my favorite part about playing that drum is how I lose some of the skin on my pinky because it rubs against the head of the field drum. So that's like a special treat for me that I really enjoy. I'm being a wise guy, but truthfully, all of the snares are amazing. They sound great, they feel great, and they're all a joy to play. But I'm just being a Weisenheimer, kind of, poking fun at one of the challenges of subbing at that show.
Dena,
tell me
I
there-
love how I mentioned that to you one day because I was getting it too, and when I found out that it was happening to you too, it was like one of those bonding.
Good. Not just me. It's the more. I have my little roll of, I forget the kind of tape that it's called. It's like that flexy, stretchy stuff. And I just put a strip around my knuckle. Problem solved.
You hit it in a certain way, and the field drum is in the way.
The drums are very tight. And I think Andreas plays with his elbow tucked, maybe. And I'm not able to really successfully, consistently land the stick there if I play that way without getting hung up on the hi-hat, or it's just a very tight space. So for me, what's most comfortable is to just kind of be relaxed and my elbows out a little bit. And in order to do that, the field drum, my hand basically comes down right on the field drum. So it used to be that my knuckle, the first few shows I subbed, I cracked my knuckle on the rim of the field drum, and I had a nice black and blue there for a while. But now it's landed to where it's just the skin on my pinky. And so it worked out really well.
So, Andres, so what made you decide to have 5 snare drums instead of one, like I always do?
Well, fortunately, I didn't make that decision. This drum set actually is a carryover from the Bring It On drum set. And I think it's the way that Lynn and Alex created this music that required 5 drums that represent different people or different moments in the show. I didn't realize it was such a health hazard, but I have such a tight space and get creative. There is space in that room, but we did have to get creative with how we used it, being that the drum that starts the show is this beautiful A&F drum that I believe is, Alex, is it 16 by 14 or something like that? I don't remember the
Something
dimension.
like that.
It's kind of a beast. So we needed to make room and make it comfortable, but I'm kind of a small guy and pretty much everyone else is bigger than I am. So making it comfortable for the subs was really, really important. So we had that in mind when we put in a new kit just recently. Alex was in charge of creating a space so that all of the subs, because I think my tallest sub is Juan Felipe and Sammy. And by the way, thank you, Juan. Juan's calling from London, by the way.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. Quite a testament to take the time to do that. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
These guys are huge and I'm like this little guy. So I think the idea that we had with Alex was to try to move things out a bit so that they would be more comfortable as well. But, it's kind of a strange thing everyone has their height with the throne, the snares tilted or it's not, so it's a very personal thing. And it's hard for a sub to come in and not change things and, sort of adapt to what's there. But the way that it is set up, I suppose you're going to leave with some scars. I feel like.
You have to have a medic outside. Sorry,
I
go
had
ahead.
the chance to chat with Ryan a little bit before he went in for his first sub day, and I'm sure he'll talk more about that. But that was one of the things I remember saying is you will bust your knuckle here, you will kneecap yourself here. It's these are the little things you learn from bruising yourself up a little bit, but that's part of the sub game. Yeah, everyone likes their drum set up differently, and when I was coming up, I was going to open jam nights all the time. And I was just sitting in on other people's drum kits. And I'd say 98, maybe 99% of those drum kits were nowhere near as nice as the gear we get to use on Broadway. And it really kind of it taught you to adapt. And I'm really into ergonomics when you're playing, but sometimes you can't do that. And in those cases, you got to figure it out. And that's why it's funny. We end up with some of the same scars, but we make it work.
So, Juan, how do you adjust being taller to this particular situation? And, have you wound up having any injuries playing a show like this?
I feel like I'm with Dena. Like I have the same problem with my pinky. But when I was practicing for the show, I actually just set up the drums exactly as they are on Broadway. I was uncomfortable at first, but it took me a while. But once I was comfortable with it, it was okay from then on, But yeah, that was a journey for sure.
Now, Ryan, I know you sub at various shows right now or have in the past. How do you adjust to different drums being a sub and on different shows?
I kind of feel like I've been pretty lucky because I felt very comfortable at Hamilton. I didn't have any of the scars.
So you don't have any pinky scars?
No, I feel a bit out of the loop. But no, I like to play things pretty tight, just in general. So I'm kind of used to that. So when I went in to play on Andres' kit, it actually felt pretty comfortable right as it was. There were a couple little things that I had to get used to in terms of how far away things were, depending on, where I had things set up in my apartment, because I have everything very tight in my apartment, even tighter than on Broadway. It felt very comfortable, which is nice because there's so much going on in Hamilton and I'm still very new. It was actually kind of a nice surprise that things felt as comfortable as they did when I went in there.
Are a sub on Broadway, usually you get recommended or the person and they bring you in. Has anybody here had to audition to sub on any shows? And did you have to audition for this one?
I had to audition for the tour. I auditioned for Alex Lacamoire and Ben Cohn for the Dear Evan Hansen tour. That was the only time I think I've auditioned, but not to sub, just to do the tour.
So has anybody else had to audition to sub on any show?
Well, in a sense for Hamilton, correct me if I'm wrong, Andres, but the protocol, as I understand it, is we all need to play through the book for him before we're allowed. He needs to sort of give us the green light to be able to go in and play our first show. So if you want to call that an audition, what?
I think at that point, there's already the commitment that,
Right.
that the person's going to play and they're going to do a great job. But there is this, when I did In the Heights, Alex used to want to hear the drummer. He would ask them to come in and that in a sense be a bit of a testing point because it was very specific music. This one, we're really in charge of it. It's quite a responsibility to pick your subs. And I think the coolest part of this podcast is that each one of my subs has a different story in how they got to playing Hamilton. The stories are so different and so unique in how they prepared. And that's what I find fascinating more than anything else. It's how each person took their time to figure it out. And I think that is sort of an interesting, like where everyone started with the process of doing it. But I mean, I never make, like if someone gets a phone call and it's for a reason. So they take their time and they learn a thing, but the audition really isn't a thing for me. It's just hearing it once before the show to make sure that everything is going to be safe more for them than anything. And that the show will be show ready, basically.
So Juan, how did you connect with Andres and how did you wind up subbing on the show?
Well, for that, I feel like I have to go back to I'm originally from Colombia. So when I was going back there, I was in college. There was a kind of well-known jazz pianist who has been living in New York for a long time. His name is Hector Martignon. So when I was in college, I used to look up to him. And one time he brought a great band to Colombia. He brought Ryan McCausland and Armando Bona, Samuel Torres, some musicians that used to live in New York at the time. So when I moved to New York, I was the Drummers Collective and I connected with Hector. He was part of the faculty for the rhythm sections. And eventually I went and started to see him play. There was this one night that I was hanging out. I believe it was the Sing Bar. And Hector was playing and Andres was there. And I know Andres and Hector have been friends for a long time. And then Hector and I got to be friends a little bit. And he introduced me to Andres. And of course, when I saw Andres for the first time, I was like, he seems familiar. And I remember seeing the Modern Drummer back home in Colombia before I moved to the US, and it was his face and in the heights and all that. So he was very kind. One time we exchanged phone numbers, and not too long after that, my ex-wife was in the final auditions for the show for Hamilton. She is an actress, and I decided to, I texted him. I was coming from another gig, and I just saw the show. It was amazing. I just happened to be here. She brought us in. He was very kind. He showed us around. That's when he asked me, like, "Oh yeah, you want to come, or you like to come see the show in the pit?" He was the one who brought me in. But that was basically it. And he asked me later to run the book. I had to come in and play for him before I went in to play for the first show.
So wait, your ex-wife is a dancer in the show?
She was. She's no longer in the show, but she was Eliza in the Chicago company.
So you didn't play the show with her?
I never did with her because she was in Chicago. She was on the Chicago tour. And she was there for a couple of years. And I stayed in New York for Andres.
I don't know. It might be kind of hard. Be like, wait a minute. You're looking up.
Yes. Yes.
Playing real hard.
One of the great things with one story as we go through each one's story, which I think would be great, is, I didn't really vet Juan. When I met him, he was such a lovely person and we got along right away. I'm Colombian as well. So, there was already a connection, but there was just this sweetness about him. And I thought to myself, I've always wanted to bring fresh people into this medium because, there are so many musicians that have been doing this for so long. I started playing Broadway show when I was 19 years old. So I had been at it for a while, but then I'd heard all the stories about how difficult it can be when you're at a show for a long time and how jaded people get, all that stuff. So I was like, if I get the opportunity ever and there's a platform, it's sort of a great responsibility to bring in fresh blood. And, to me, that's always been really important. It's something I take a lot of pride in because Juan, to my knowledge, had never played a Broadway show, and I hadn't really heard him play ever, but it was his personality. It was the way he spoke to me about his life and all that stuff. And the coincidence of his ex-wife, that just happened to be a part of the story, but it certainly wasn't the main. The main part was him and what he brought. Just speaking, that was the first thing. Just talking, that was the first thing that engaged me to thinking, oh my God. And then I started to look into what he played, how he played, and all that stuff. But I never knew that he would turn out to be such a great addition to the community of Broadway drumming. And he's, for someone that's never done that before, to come in and do it on a show like that, it's so long. It's a 3-hour long show. It's exhausting, and did it with so much finesse and with such a great disposition. One of the nicest, the kindest people I know, and I feel so blessed to have him as a sub. So his story is a very unique one because he was playing a lot of jazz, and he just came in, and all of a sudden, like, he's this incredible drummer to do Broadway, because not every drummer can do Broadway. Not every Broadway drummer can play rock, jazz, or whatever. It is a very specialized thing, and he just nailed it.
So
That's right. I think.
who's talking?
That was me. I was going to what Andres said too. Juan, I can say the same thing about his generosity, because I think a few days before I was going to start at the show, Juan allowed me to come and sit with him and watch him. And, when you're getting ready to sub for the first time, and it was my first Broadway show as well, and I was freaking out. And I had watched Andres, but it gave me a completely different perspective on the show to watch another sub do it, who has to deal with similar pitfalls. How do you navigate the drum set? How do you try to slip into this role of being someone else? And Juan let me sit there behind him, which I've had someone sit behind me too, and it's nerve-wracking, but he let me do it, and it really helped to build my confidence before I got into that show. So yeah, I can say the same thing. Juan,
What's the
Sort of
biggest
piggy-
lesson you learned from that experience?
from sitting and watching Juan.
Mhm.
So I think, Juan, actually, one of the coolest things I think about the way Juan plays the show is Juan plays the show open-handed, a lot of the show open-handed. And I mean, I'm not I don't play the show open-handed. I'm not that type of player, but it was just cool to watch him adapt the parts to his style, the way he sits behind the kit. Because none of us are Andres. I mean, we're not built like him. We didn't grow up in his environment. We're all we're different musicians, and to watch someone sit there and play physically completely different, but still absolutely crush the parts was a complete eye opener to me, because I was under the impression going in that I had to be identical to Andres or I was going to get fired. I felt, because I didn't know it. We didn't have Broadway 101 where I could sit there and listen to drummers talk about this stuff. You were relying on, hopefully good advice from the people around you, but to actually go in there and see it in practice was huge. It was really huge.
So Ryan, how did you get connected with this whole Hamilton scene?
My connection was Alex Slackamore, who I worked with on the Evan Hansen tour. But I just wanted to go back and say that, to piggyback on that sort of domino effect, I was the one that watched Alex play and sit behind him, and I also got to sit and watch Juan play as well. So it really is a generous group of people, because I was very, very nervous about going in, especially, later on a show that everybody knows. In some ways, it made it a little bit easier, because there's so many resources that I had at this point, rather than being at the very start where for some people you didn't have as many resources. But also very nerve-wracking, because everyone knows exactly how it's supposed to sound. But thank you so much, Juan and Alex, for letting me come and watch, because it was honestly so helpful to get like 3 different perspectives on it, including Andres.
I got
And
an email from Alex Blackamore, and he said there's a drummer who's coming off tour. If you need a drummer, he'd be a great sub for you. And if Alex texts you or emails you anything and it has a name attached to it, you're going to be all right, no matter what. I mean, it's I don't know. He's just one of those people that he knows the people that he hires so well, and he's very careful about how he picks and chooses. So it was the easiest thing, but at the time I was thinking, oh my gosh, I have some subs already. But at that time, then I lost a couple of subs, which is the greatest thing for them, because they get their own show. And I was just like, Ryan, of course, like all of my subs, are the nicest people in the world, and we hit it off right away. Same thing, just a great respect and kindness and sweetness, and I don't think I've ever gotten to my show after a sub's been there and the room's been a mess. Like, Ryan brought in a bottle of compressed air to get rid of wood shavings, like that thoughtfulness and that kindness and that sweetness. Alex always tunes the drums. He's also like been my drum tech for a long time. And, like Juan, like everyone leaves, Dena and everyone, they leave the room in such great shape, and there's settings on AVMs, but that takes a thoughtfulness, because the first thing you want to do is get out, because you're there for 3 hours killing yourself. And by the time you're done, I just need to go. But to sit a little bit extra and make sure, that takes a special person. So again, for the people that are watching, if you want to do this, a lot of it has to do with who you are and how you treat people. That's a big part of it. I'm so blessed. Every one of my subs is so considerate and so kind. Big deal.
So speaking of having your own show, Dena, you have your own show, Little Shop of Horrors. It's off
Yeah.
Broadway, and you also sub on Broadway.
I do.
What made you decide to say, you know what, I want to sub on Broadway, and how did you get connected to Andres to get this opportunity?
I am now subbing 4 books on Broadway.
Yeah.
And I have my own chair. I was a touring musician for 20 years or whatever in a band. They always say that you get show chops. You do that thing really well because you're on tour and you're doing the same songs every night. And obviously playing the same Broadway show every night, you have a similar thing. You have your show chops, right? You're doing that same book every night. So thankfully, by the grace of God, Little Shop is doing really well. And we opened in 2019 and we came back strong after the pandemic, thank God. And we're good. So knock on wood. The opportunity to continue to network. I'm fairly new to the Broadway world. I transitioned from my band to Broadway in 2018. So it's still pretty new to me. I know a pretty good amount of people in the drumming community, but I don't necessarily know a lot of music directors or all the contractors or whatever. So I thought it would behoove me to continue to broaden my skills, work with different conductors, get better at that whole thing, play other books, play other types of material. It was important to me to continue to try to grow as a player in this community because I love it. It's very important to me and I take it very seriously and I want to be as good as I can be. So going back to how Andres and I met, gosh, I'm losing track of years. It had to be 15 years ago. It was when In the Heights was running. In the Heights had opened. So
Yeah.
2008, maybe 2007.
It's like 100 pounds ago for me. Because when we met, I was like 100 pounds heavier.
No, you were not.
Yeah, it was before, but it was a long time ago. Dena,
So we were at NAMM, ironically, both living in New Jersey, but we meet in Anaheim, California, as so many people do. You go all the way across the country to network and connect with people. We were both Sabian artists at the time, and we were in the Sabian booth and wandering around. And he just came up and started talking to me, and he was like, "Oh, you should come down and check out my book." And I was like, I thought to myself, why is he asking me to do this? He's never heard me play. He doesn't know me at all. Like, really? Okay, cool. So that was the first Broadway show I got to sit in a pit and watch a book, and it was in the Heights. And it was like, my mind was completely blown. I was like, I don't know how any person on the planet can do what that man just did. It was nuts. It was otherworldly, truly. And we talked about me learning the book, and then he had too many subs and I was kind of let off the hook and didn't ultimately have to learn it because he had enough subs. But that's how we originally met. And then I think it was maybe 2016, we had connected over something else and we were talking about Hamilton, and I hadn't done any Broadway at that point. I hadn't subbed. I hadn't had my own chair. And he was like, I would like you to eventually sub for me, but like, you're not there yet. Like you're not quite ready, kind of a thing. And then, but come watch and let's stay on the radar. And, when the time is right, I'll bring you in. And then I got head over heels and I had subbed at the Share Show and, PS, I had some experience and I had, kind of, I think a better foundation to step in and be in that environment. So that's sort of semi-cliff note version.
and she came in and killed it. And by the way, has an incredible distinction, and we have the great honor of her being the first female to play that Broadway book, which is a humongous deal and something I'm very proud of. So,
Thank you.
So I'm just meeting Juan and Alex today, but I've talked to Dena and Ryan as far as playing multiple shows at one time. You learn the book and you watch the conductor that normally conducts the show. Then you sub the show. Then maybe 2 or 3 times later, there's a new conductor and then a new bass player, a new guitar player. And you're like, whoa, everything's changing. How do you adapt to situations like that? Juan, you have any thoughts on that?
On adjusting to like just different shows and the mindset of playing show.
Yeah, like
every
for instance,
night.
on Hamilton, when you first subbed there, you subbed with a certain bass player. Maybe was it Richard, or I can't remember who's on guitar.
Rob,
Yes, and the regular people and the regular conductor, and then maybe 3 or 4 times in, it's a new bass player, a new guitar player, and a whole new pit musician there, and a new conductor. What kind of things do you do to adapt to those situations?
Well, I feel like it was pretty consistent, I have to say. Like, I didn't really, I mean, everyone had a different touch, of course, because it's a different person. And of course, I learned that, I mean, it's impossible to 100% replicate somebody else's sound. I think that's not the idea, but I slowly understood that the whole point is to come in and deliver what's necessary for the show, to be part of the engine of what the show is asking for from the drums. And that's what I saw in the other instruments as well. Like maybe somebody had a different touch. Maybe they were playing just a different, like as maybe more subtle sound, or maybe a little more sharp, way of playing, but the intention was there. And that's what I was trying to focus on. And that made me feel like, oh, we're all doing this. Is not necessarily throwing me off. On the contrary, it's like I'm hearing things a little bit different. And there's a little bit of room to just, there's a little bit of range where you can navigate playing the show. It doesn't have to be all one tone. There's like different layers that you can just kind of move around a bit.
Has anybody had an issue where I was talking about this on another with somebody else about being under the wand, I think is what it is, the stick. If somebody is a conductor and they conduct, and usually on the downbeat, some conductors, I don't know if it's like this on Hamilton, where you conduct and the bottom and the top is where you're supposed to hit. Is it like that on Hamilton?
It's not. And that's a great question. And I'll just jump in really quick because it's one that is really important to me. Alex Lackamore trains all of the incoming key ones. Because when Alex left, we had a new musical director, Kurt. And Kurt left, we had a new musical director, but they were all trained by Alex. So Alex has a way, and I've said this in other interviews, his hand tells like 1,000 stories in each stroke. And when I went to college, I was interested in conducting. I went to Manhattan School and I wanted to conduct. And I dated a girl whose father was a very well-known conductor from Italy. So I learned a lot about conducting. So I know that thing that you're talking about, which is more of a classical.
Like an orchestral something, right? Like
Yeah.
An orchestral, I don't
Yeah,
know what.
that does not exist there. At Hamilton, the conducting is subdivided. So he subdivides as he's playing. So they're subdividing in 4 so that you see exactly what it is that's going on. And there's no question as to where that is. If you ever got a chance to watch Alex conduct, it's like watching a metronome, but in someone's hand. There's no confusion ever. And it's very strict and very precise. I think in the moments when there is no click, excuse me, and there are moments that are legato moments, like vocally, there is that beautiful expression that goes with his movements or with whoever's conducting the show, because they all came from that same school. It's very precise, and there's very little room for interpretation as to where downbeats are, where to feel it, which is a great thing, because it's like you know, that it's like a hi-hat keeping time. That hand is going and it never lets up, and the left hand is playing, heads moving to the actors. It's a beautiful thing to watch. It's a thing of art, honestly.
It's truly the thing that I never stress about when I'm there. I know maybe the first time when it was Mike Moyes versus Ian, Ian Sub was conducting for me and I was like, oh no, I'd done a few shows with Ian and now I'm like, oh no, what's this? And then once I saw him up there, I'm like, this is fine. It's all fine. And same thing with his subs and anybody. I've worked with 3 or 4 different conductors there, and they're all, to Andres's point, they're all kind of the same. It's very consistent, very easy to follow. It's not the thing. That's not the thing that you stress about there. You stress about whacking your fingers. You stress about getting a stick caught. You might, like any of that stuff, not making it over to a drum because there's some quick choreography or whatever, thankfully.
Speaking of stress, I wanted to ask you guys, and lady, the most stressful song in the show. But what's the most stressful song or moment in the show? And we can start with Alex, that is in Hamilton.
Oh, every time that Skylar lick comes up, which it comes up like 2.5 times in the show, you start Skylar Sisters with it, then there's a reprise, and then there's kind of a subtle version of it that starts the exit music. Just because it's exposed and it's out in the open and you're trying to drop it right, you get an upbeat and you drop it on the downbeat. And when the conductor gives you the downbeat, the percussionist starts the click at the same time. And hopefully you all land right on that.
That one.
I'm really good friends with all the percussion subs and the principal there, and we talk about it all the time. If we ever don't land it, usually the two of us will be in the bathroom at halftime arguing over who messed it up. I'll be like, no, I messed it up. And the percussionist, no, it's on me. We're trying to take the blame for it. But it's exposed, it's out in the open, and you really want to land it. And it's kind of an iconic fill. I taught music in a high school during COVID, and the kids knew what I did, and they were all like, how do you play the Skylar thing? There's also a big, long section in Act 2 where it's kind of say no to this, room where it happens, then the Skylar reprise, so you got to play the lick again, then right into a cabinet battle, then Washington on your side. It's a big, long stretch with a lot of difficult material where you don't really get a break. I don't want to call it stressful because all those songs are really fun to play, but there's a lot of really accurate stuff you have to do. There's a lot of conducted sections in there where you really want to be on it. The whole end of room where it happens is not on a click, so you really want to make sure you don't speed it up. So that whole kind of front middle of Act 2 gets a little challenging as well.
Ryan?
Pretty much Alex nailed it. It's the whole section of Act 2 for sure is just one right after the other. The one that really makes me very nervous is there's a transition period from Skylar Defeated into Cabinet Battle 2. Where you're moving from the acoustic drums to the electric pads. It makes me very nervous because you have to make sure that you've triggered the patch change to go to the next scene in the DTX pad, because otherwise you don't have enough time to go in that moment because it's literally bum, ba, bum, ba, bum, and you're right into the cabinet battle. So if you haven't changed the pad in enough time, which when I was practicing, that was something that came up before. I was like, oh, make sure you change the patch because otherwise there's going to be no electric drums. And they're going to hear nothing on stage. It'll be those scenes from Room Where It Happens. But that one always makes me nervous. And then I don't know if anyone else, it's remembering to put the splash on and off the piccolo snare, because there are times where you have to remember to keep it on there, because you can't, if you look and you see, oh, this supposed to be a splash, there's no time to course correct because you just keep playing the whole time, So if you haven't remembered to put the splash where it needs to go in the time where it's written in your notes, sometimes it can be a little bit too late to try and get it on there in time. So remembering to put it on and take it off at the right time is sometimes a stress factor, but yeah.
Back to that piccolo snare.
I definitely concur. That transition, similar for me from Skylar Defeated into the cabinet battle, kind of gets my heart rate up a little bit. But I mean, in general, as a through composed show, to what Ryan was saying, there's a lot of choreography in the show that doesn't involve actual playing. It's very specific page turns, it's setting pages, it's the maneuvering of the splash on and off of the piccolo. For those who don't know what we're talking about, you literally put the splash on the piccolo and play on top of the splash for a certain sound effect. And there are very specific moments when that needs to happen because you're playing some exposed piccolo and then you're playing some with the splash on. So, changing the patches for the electronics, setting the brushes where they need to go, like all of those moments, all that choreography is very precise and very specific. So you're on high alert from top to bottom for 3 hours. Like your brain is just laser focused. You cannot drift. You cannot check out and wonder how the Yankees are doing or think about what you need to get at the grocery store. That cannot happen. You are on super high alert. Also for me, up until very recently, the very top of Act 2 I always tripped on that. And there's moments where you're in and out of click. I messed with my mix, and turning up certain things helped me deliver that number better. So that's also a big part of this up game, is really knowing what you need and getting what you need dialed into your mix so that you can follow who you need to be following when there's no click or when there's certain more exposed moments. A learning process and part of the game, but that's the way it goes.
A colleague of mine said that subbing is like a 2-hour heart attack. Did you have any defibrillator moments? Any times where you felt like, oh my God, your heart's pumping out of your chest?
Oh, I'm 100% with Alex. Like the coming on the downbeat of the Skylar Sisters, that's always a moment. I mean, it's not stressful anymore, but it's definitely something that kind of, your heart rate goes up a little bit, just a little bit. So it's like, okay, here we go. Ryan nailed it too. Like the whole first half, not just one song, but like the whole first half of the second act. That's when you really have to, you can't blank. You have to just be playing, turning pages, and make sure you grab the one brush and then leave your stick on the thumb, and then you put it back and you grab both brushes, then you drop the brushes, you grab your sticks, and this is you never stop, through the whole room where it happens. So all that. And then from going to that into those kind of defeated, then you play the fill again, and then you go into the cabinet battle. So it's basically that's what I could think of.
If I can jump in for a second, Alex and I first met, he hadn't done any shows at all. And again, this is sort of the theme, going back to bringing in fresh folks to the show, and his story of how he went through the process of learning this show, I think is an interesting one when you're talking about stress. And I think it's a great question. And I think, Alex, you should, if you can, talk a little bit about sort of the things that happen in preparation. And some people have the luxury and the ability 3 months to learn a show. Other folks need more time because they want fully prepared. Alex dedicated a year to learn. So, Alex, one of the things that we did in your learning of the things, try to help counter anything that might happen. You can maybe share some of those stories, because things happen all the time. They happen just this past weekend. Stuff just goes wrong. We have to figure out how to keep going.
Well, the backstory is pretty long, and I will definitely abbreviate it to focus more on the topic at hand. Thought I was out of high school, thought I was going to be a classical musician. I was mainly a timpanist, got partway through music school, realized it wasn't for me and dropped out. Then at 20 years old, tried to start reinventing myself as a drummer because I knew I wanted to play drums, but I wasn't a drummer. I couldn't really play drums. So I got a job managing a drum shop, and I was doing that by day, studying in the basement after hours. And Andres happened to walk into the shop. I think he contacted the shop when he was in town with Book of Mormon. And I had been involved with my high school youth theater. I was kind of a theater geek, knew of In the Heights and knew who Andres was. And we kept in touch. And I started teching your drums first. I was coming over and working on the drums because, I had a lot of knowledge from the drum shop. but I really wanted to be a player. And you let me sit with you in the pit, and I watched you play it and was floored by what I saw and knew I wanted it. So kind of like what Dena said, you came to me and you were like, well, you're not really ready yet, but I can tell you're hungry. I can tell you want it. So let me help you. I ended up studying with Andres for quite some time. And it wasn't a sit at a practice pad and play paradiddles kind of studying. It was more of a mentorship thing. We put together a home studio and I was his engineer. I would go, and whenever he had a session, I would get to sit over his shoulder and listen to him play, turn the knobs and study that. But eventually he said, look, I've got a room I can rent you. You can come down here. You can be in it. You can get in the game, learn what it's like to actually do this. And when the time comes, get in there. So I was living down in North Jersey. I quickly ran out of money. So I got a job selling t-shirts. Actually, I was selling t-shirts at the West Side Theater where Little Shop of Horrors now is. Andres had me dissect the book to the point where I couldn't get it wrong, if that makes any sense. And I mean, you can always mess up. Your nerves are there, but there's an old saying that says, don't practice till you get it right. Practice until you can't get it wrong. So he had me play these mind games that were really interesting, like learning the book backwards, literally going measure by measure from the end of the show and learning every note in the ink, doing things like memorizing tempos, like really memorizing tempos, getting really good with tempo recall. So I know when that Skylar comes in, even if the cue is a little weird at the top, I can adjust. And he started doing things like having me play the book to conductor video, like most of us do. But he would hook up a talkback mic into my headphones and just start cracking jokes or screaming random things to try to throw my focus. And he'd tell me, unless I tell you to stop, you do not stop. He essentially trained me so that if we got into a nightmare scenario, I would be able to recover. And we had an issue, I think a couple weeks ago, where we had a computer malfunction, which happens. And it happened to be in one of the cabinet battles. And the only things that are playing in the cabinet battles are the drums, the percussion, the bass, and the backing track. There's nothing else going on in the cabinet battles. So when the computer malfunctioned, the backing track was gone. The percussionist had to stop because he was trying to fix it because the percussionist is running the Ableton rig. The bass player stopped for a little bit, and it got to the point where the only things going on were the drums and the rapper on the stage. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know it was a computer failure. I thought I lost all sound. I was looking up at the MD through the little window, trying to figure it out, and it just kept going. And had I not done all of that training, I might have stopped with the rest of everyone else, and then there would have been a problem. But it's not the practicing it until you get it right. It's the drilling it until you really can't get it wrong. I got into Hamilton and started getting my bearings there, and then I ended up starting to sub for Dena at Little Shop. And I got myself into a little bit of trouble because I did not take my own advice. I practiced and practiced until I got it right, but I didn't spend enough time practicing what would happen if you get it wrong. And it had to do with running the Ableton rig because I had never run an Ableton rig before. So there was a little bit of a learning curve there, but I learned my lesson there. Again, it's just what Andres drilled into my head is work on it until you know it better than anyone else, know it better than the music director. Like I know every lyric to Hamilton. I've gotten to the point where I listen to everyone else's parts. I know the bass parts. I can't play them, but I know what they are. I know the guitar parts. I can't play them, but I know what they are. And it's just trying to do everything you can to be comfortable in a really stressful situation. Because it's stressful. You're trying to be someone else and do something that's really hard. What I would thank Andres for and would thank him for the rest of my life is that kind of training, like teaching you to do something until you know it, as well as you know how to breathe, essentially.
I think there should be an Andrés Forero 6-week basic training for Broadway drumming.
Camp.
Oh my God.
Hey,
I mean, some of it got a little hardcore, and we're buddies. So at the end of the session, we'd sit down, have a glass of wine, and hug it out and be friends. But I remember him coming into a session once, and he's like, "I heard that last fill you played. That last fill you played just got you fired." But you know what? That tough love, like I tell people all the time, Andres was tougher on me than I think any music director has ever been, and that is, I'm very grateful for that.
So say that saying once again. Don't practice until, what's the quote?
Don't practice until you get it right. Practice it until you can't get it wrong.
That's great.
Big genius. I think the preparation thing is important. You know, I was doing the Book of Mormon, and Lack called me, and he was, you know, like, there's a show and we're not really sure what's going to happen with it. And this is all true. In fact, I have all of it video recorded because I thought that something really special was going to happen to me personally, just being apart from my family, having been on tour with Mormon for 2 years. I was away from New York, so I knew I wasn't in trouble, even though Lack and I are very good friends. I was thinking, God wants to talk to me, you know. Great. So I got an iPad and I just started videotaping the whole thing. It's like, there's a show, it's called Hamilton. It's about this guy, Alexander Hamilton. And I'll admit, I had no freaking clue who Alexander Hamilton was. I didn't know anything about the story, nothing at all. But in my head, I'm like, oh my God, I get to be reunited with my family. You know, here's this great opportunity. And so I videoed the whole process that probably lasted about 2 weeks, where I, you know, Mormon performances are the same when you're on tour, then if you're the person that holds a seat in New York, the difference being that you can't sub it out because you're guy or gal on tour. So after the show, I would check into a studio, and I did that from midnight, you know, till, I don't know, 7 or 8 in the morning. And on my days off, I do 16, 17 hours. I did not want to disappoint. And there was a lot of information, and it's changing constantly, you know. So I have so much footage of the whole process of me like throwing sticks, and I couldn't get a certain part, or something just didn't feel right, or I felt something that wasn't in the music. And I'm like, I'd look at the camera, I'd be like, do I do this? Or if I do it, I'm going to get fired the first day I get there. And I literally got off the plane with my bags and went straight to the public theater to play my first show off Broadway. But I was prepared. And I was like, man, I'm going to own this thing. Because first of all, what a gift to be given, to be asked, to be reunited with your family. That was the first gift, you know, the greatest gift ever. And then to be a part of a show. The way that he talked about it, he was kind of like, oh, well, we don't know what this show is going to be like. Well, we know what it turned out to be, you know, so preparation is very important.
I think when people want to play on Broadway, they may not know how to get connected with people and how to get involved. If somebody's watching this and they're new to New York City and they want to come to New York and play on Broadway, what do you suggest to them that they do in order to connect with people like yourselves who've done Hamilton and other musicians that are on Broadway? What do you think they should do? How do I go ahead and get involved in playing a Broadway show?
Depending on your age, start as young as you can. Like I have some friends in their early 20s who are already killing it. You know, I don't think I played my first Broadway show till I was 31. It took a little longer for me, but I was fortunate to learn about theater because I had a really good high school youth theater. I didn't start playing drums in the orchestra pit right away, but I did get on stage and act for a little bit and learn how the theater worked. So I would say if you're interested in it, the first thing you want to do is find every single situation that you can find to put yourself in it. And start working your way up. I had never played a Broadway show before, but I knew a lot about theater before I came into this. I knew who the composers were. I knew the names of music directors. I knew who Andres was when he walked into that drum shop that day. So do your research, really learn the craft. I mean, there's a long lineage of theater history. I usually can find common ground with a lot of music directors because I truly love the stuff. Like, I truly do like the stuff. I listen to the music on my own time. I go to see shows. I don't just go through the motions because I want a job. So one of the first things I would say, and it's not a logistical, maybe is how to meet people or anything like that, but truly love the stuff. Get into it. Get your mind into it. If you want to do this, don't just do it because it's a job. Do it because you really love this thing. Because that's one thing that was a little discouraging for me at first, is I would run into some people who very clearly did it for a job. And, I was young and really wanting to get in and really loving it and wanting the chance. And I think that's one of the things Andres did see, is that, I truly love this craft. And I think that's really important for any young person who's coming up, getting into it. So what if it's your fallback plan? That's cool. It is a fallback plan. I've seen theater be a fallback plan for some people. I'm not going to lie. I've heard people say it. But even if that's the case, respect it, love it, and put your heart into it.
Juan, thoughts?
I have to say, as maybe kind of what Alex said, is just get into it and put all your heart into it. You have to do it like you love it. Otherwise, it's not going to work. If you don't respect your craft, respect the music, take care of the music like it's a treasure, just be serious about it. It's a big responsibility, and it's something that should be taken seriously. It's definitely something that you just have to practice and put your heart into it. Otherwise, it's going to be noticeable. It's going to be easy to spot somebody who's, when you're not into it, there are going to be ways that it comes out and it translates into the music.
Very true. Ryan, Dena, thoughts?
There's a lot to unpack in that question for me. First of all, the networking component. I personally get fairly inundated with people wanting to buy me coffees and talk and get to know me. And, with all due respect, I appreciate the invitations, but I am so busy and I just don't have time for that. It means a lot to me because I've had people do this. Can I pay you for your time? Can you do a 1-hour mentoring session? Can we chat about the industry? Whether or not I charge them, whatever the deal is, I personally really appreciate that gesture more than like going to have a cup of coffee. I'm not trying to be like, I'm too cool for you, but like, I really don't have time. So beyond that, once you get into the saying yes to everything that Juan and Alex said, 100%, you got to love it. I love it. I grew up a theater nerd. I always wanted to do this. So grateful that I've had the opportunity. And I'd like to think that translates in what I bring into a situation. For the youngins looking to get into it, be in a band, learn how to play, learn how to work with other people. Some of the stuff that Alex talked about that he learned from Andres, like screaming into a microphone and trying to rattle him. I got some of those lessons being in a touring rock band, power going out, things totally falling apart in the moment. And, whether it's like doing your own headlining show, opening for the Rolling Stones, like whatever environment I was in, I took a lot from that I was able to apply in a Broadway pit. And then lastly, if you're going to sub for somebody, please do the work. Like, you're not bringing you into, oh, look, these are all the cool things that I learned in music school. I want to show off and impress a music director. No, you sit down and you transcribe. At least this is my process. And this is my understanding of how you're supposed to sub a show. It took me, I don't know how many hundreds of hours to sit through Hamilton and transcribe every note that Andreas played. Every fill, every lick, everything, nope, it's not that Tom, it's this Tom. It's not this, it's that. Transcribe the entire book. Learn the book like that. I mean, for me, in my process, that helps me internalize it. It helps me learn. That's part of my learning process. But I'm also trying to be respectful of what he did in creating that book. It's not for you to come in and think, well, I should play, this would be a better thing to play. You will not sub for me if that's how you're going to play my book. People on stage are counting on you. People in the pit are counting on you. If you're playing random things, it affects the rest of the show completely 100%. Do your job, do the work, learn the person's book, be respectful, and show up and be ready to go. That's all I got.
I want to add, Andres connected me with a person who is affiliated with a company called Meathook. It's called meathook.com. MEETHOOK.
Oh, okay. Yep.
.com. Can't even spell this morning. I started using it, and people that want to connect with drummers or any other musicians or any other people that are on the platform, I find it to be a great resource to actually have one-on-one situations instead of saying, can I meet with you for coffee? It's much better to take the time out to get these kind of mentoring opportunities to actually ask us anything you want. And I highly recommend, if anyone else hasn't done it on this platform that I'm talking to here, I highly recommend getting connected with Meathook. Those people that are interested in connecting with one of us, connect to us on meathook.com, and you can schedule time and learn whatever you'd like to learn, whether it's a lesson or whether you just like to talk for a half hour or an hour. Just talk about anything, almost. Let's keep it on topic here. But speaking of youngins, Ryan, since you say you're new to all this stuff, but if someone wants to come in and sub on 17 books like you're doing now.
But first, I am not subbing on 17 books.
15?
No. I'm so lucky to be part of the show. And then one other, but I don't know. I mentioned the last time, and it made me feel good to hear Andres talk about it too. But I think it's really important to be kind, just a kind person in general. I think it really goes a long way in terms of music is such a, just not just Broadway, but music in general is such a people person. The connections you make are so important. And I think there's so much investment, I think, that everyone has said already in terms of being prepared and being respectful of the music and coming in and knowing your role is to, especially with Broadway, check your ego at the door and being like, I have a job to do. They're counting on me. It's because, this is so much bigger than just you. But I think that, in addition to that, I just find it to be so rewarding to, go into somebody else's place of work and have somebody say, oh, you're a very kind person. I really value the respect you have for the music and the respect you have for the person who you're covering for. I think it really goes a long way. And even if it's not the most important thing that I think everyone is looking for, I think it might be the most rewarding. You get to walk away saying, I've always had the philosophy of like, regardless of how many opportunities I got to play something, I would always love for somebody to be like, I liked him. I would love to work with him again. Like at the end of the day, I don't know when that's going to happen or if it'll happen, but that's always how I want to leave. Like, I had a great time with this person. I would love to work with him again in the future. And if I center myself around that orbit, I'm always walking away feeling like I did the absolute best I could.
You never know who's listening to you in the audience. You never know who's listening to you in the pit. And when you play with a lot of these musicians that play on Broadway shows, they do outside things, and you can connect with people in those kind of situations like you just talked about. If you're playing you're playing your best and you connect with them in the pit, and it's like, you know what, I'd like to work with you on this project. And this keyboard player winds up being the music director for something brand new and wants to bringing you along, and then you have your own show with that particular music director. Then you have your own drum set, and you could put a piccolo snare on the left to help injure other musicians.
Payback.
It all comes down to the piccolo.
I think that, Ryan, you really hit the nail on the head as far as being a good person and being kind. I can piggyback on that too, because I learned this from Andres, but I also think that, and I know we're all very busy in what we do, but finding some time to pay it forward is huge. I mean, I wanted to attain this position from the time I was young, and I've attained this position with the help of some amazing people. I feel that it would be a really horrible thing to try to keep that to myself. So I'm generally pretty shy in crowds at the stage door. but occasionally there'll be a family with some kids and they'll see the people leaving in all black and recognize that they're in the band, and they'll say, you know, my kid's musical, or this is my son or my daughter who does this. And if I will take, I've missed my train taking the time for kids who show me that they want to do this. The other day, our house manager brought a couple high school kids down into the pit after the show. And I was trying to leave, you know, tidying up the room, putting everything back like we talked about. But the house manager brought these two kids in to look at the drum kit, and they were high school seniors, music students. One of them was a drummer, and they were getting ready to go to college. They were in town from Iowa to check out a Broadway show, and they found their way backstage. I missed my train. I probably spent a half hour with them in the pit, just talking about the show. And what struck me is the kid who played the drums was passionate about it. He knew his stuff. He had researched this. He knew that drum kit better than I did walking into the room. So I had him sit down at the drum kit to take a picture of him, because I said, sit on the throne and take a picture. And he sat and he asked me about the snare drum, because we got this big bronze snare drum, this 20-pound cast bronze snare drum is the main snare. And I told him, I said, I just finished tuning it. Pick up a stick and tap it. So he picked up a stick, and I heard him, he picked up the sticks and he kind of went flam, kick, very softly, and turned around sheepishly and looked at me like, is that too much? And I looked right at him and I said, you know, you want to finish the lick, play the lick. And he played the Skylar lick with one hand. And I asked how he knew how to do that. And he said, I watched Andres on a video from him playing it at PASIC. The kid knew his stuff. So I had to talk with him about my background, how I found my way to where I got, you know, I talked to him and found out what his plans were. And I told him, you know, when you're done going to school in Iowa and you got your chops and you got your skills, move to where the music is and stay in touch. And I think that's the best thing that we can do, is when you see someone who's young and you see someone who's, you know, going for it, encourage it, give them what you can. And you know what? I missed my train. I took another one a half hour later. It was not a problem to do something like that.
How do you not celebrate your subs when you hear stories like that? Like, you know, there's unsung heroes, and I'm so grateful that you allowed this platform that you have to shine a light on them. I wouldn't be able to do what I do without them. They've made me a better person because I've become friends with them, with my family. And I'm a better player because, you know, sometimes I'll show up and they won't know that I'm there, and I'll listen to them at the sound desk. And I'll think to myself, my God, why didn't I think of that? Or why am I playing this like that when I could be playing it like that, you know? So there's so much to be grateful for with subs. Yeah, I didn't sub a show on Broadway ever, except for one, my first one. And I didn't really sub it because I just did it. Eli Fontaine, who was in Max Roach's and Boom, was a dear friend of mine. And I was working at Max Roach's house at the time. And Eli called Max's house and said, hey, your Andres is there. Can I talk to him? And so Max is like, hey, Eli wants to talk to you. So I get on the phone, and Eli's like, look, Jelly's Last Jam is closing and the first national tour is going out. I can't do first, 6 months or whatever, a year of the show. I don't remember how long it was because it was such a long time ago, but it was a long haul. And I had just gotten to Manhattan School of Music, and I was thinking, oh my God, I deferred my scholarship because I was on tour with the circus. So here now I got to go and tell them I'm going away again, but how do you say no? This is Gregory Hines, Maurice Hines, Frida Payne, Step Stewart, Sabian Glover. Red Press was the guy that hired me. And that was my first show. So I have such respect for Dena doing 4 shows. I can barely remember this show. and Ryan doing 2 shows, and Alex doing 2 shows. One is doing other shows as well. I mean, it's just amazing to me. A big shout out to my other subs, Carlo Patrizio, Dan Berkery, and Sammy Mardino. I'm thinking anyone else. I mean, I have the best subs, and I'm so blessed and so grateful for them, because literally you sit sometimes and I'll because life things happen. Say I'll call them and be like, "Can I put you on hold for this week?" That's asking a lot of someone. But if they don't have stuff going on, and say, "Well, I can't do this day, but I can do that day." Well, okay, great. Being a sub is difficult because you get called last minute, and it's like you have to get there on time. All the wonderful things were said that are so true. And then you have to walk in and adjust your life and adjust your emotions to a show that's very emotional. And you can't fake this show. There's no way to fake the show in terms of being a good person and being kind and all. You can't fake that either. And those two things are symbiotic with this show. You know, you can't dial this one in. And I believe that there's a certain humanity that is required to be a part of something this special. I'm blessed to have the subs that I do, for them carrying that and having that, first and foremost, just being wonderful people, but then being such amazing musicians.
So with that said, I want to thank you for being a part of this panel. And there will be more like this. And I think I'm going to try to connect with Michael, who is brought me into the whole meethook.com thing, to do something on that platform where people can chime in. One more time, Alex, what's that saying again? I love that saying.
I do too. I think it's great.
Don't practice until you get it right. Practice until you can't get it wrong.
With that said,
T-shirt out of that. That on your
exactly. That should be
shirt, man.
under this T-shirt. That's what it's going to say next time when I'm going to.
I want to say
royalties.
that came from Doug Mayer, my high school band teacher, who was the one who kind of put me on the path. I went into high school thinking I was going to be a mechanical engineer and came out knowing I was going to be a musician. And it was because of that teacher who really made a difference. And I believe that saying came from him, because he was really the one who drilled proper practice into my head. Not practice, but that's a whole nother discussion.
And similarly, I had a coach in my younger years who used to say, practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect.
That's a good one. Man, I don't have one. I got nothing. Well, there's nothing that could beat either of those two. Those are great sayings.
Yeah. I feel like after that, I can't top any of those two, you know, like it's hard to come up with something better than that.
It just stuck in my head. Like I probably doing with everyone else. That I've never heard that saying before, but God, that's so good.
Yeah, it really is.
It's a really good one. But well, thank you guys so much, Clayton. Man, thank you for
thank you, Clayton.
you created, and for allowing us to sort of switch it up a bit, you know, and give these
I think,
well, you know, that's important.
I know, Andres, I think you might have something that you're interested in, like in day in the life of a pit musician or whatever you may be working on. But
I wrote a film. It'll be released at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I think, next year. We premiered it at our second visit there, but now it's an hour long. And so we have more footage, and it's, you know, we're going to send it to some film festivals, some good stuff there.
that's great. Well, anyway, thank you all once again. Hopefully I'll meet some of you in person. Thank you for being part of the podcast, and I will catch up with you guys soon.
Thanks,
Love
Clayton.
it, Brian. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Clayton.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.